Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 172, where we're going to talk about that feeling that most of us feel sometimes, where we feel kind of against our partner, or like our partner is against us, like they are, in a sense, the bad guy. Unfortunately, this is very common in our intimate relationships, in our modern world, even if it's just subtle. It's not something we want. It doesn't lead to the connection and the loving feelings that we want to have with our honey. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about why this happens. We're going to give you an understanding of what's going on, why over time we tend to feel more of this almost animosity on a low level, or maybe on a larger level, and what it takes to shift out of it, along with 3 concrete steps to do so. So this is wonderful for you, even if you don't feel like there's much animosity in your relationship, even if you only feel the subtlest bit of disconnection or distance, because listening to this episode and applying what I'm sharing here will help prevent that from deepening into this sense of really being against each other and this division that too many couples fall into. Or if you feel a lot of that sense of he's kind of like the bad guy, or that animosity, or that sense of being against each other at times, then this is definitely a great episode for you. And truthfully, I think that if there was one thing that I could shout out from the rooftops right now to help all of humankind and our very planet, this would be it, what I'm going to share today. This is that important, so definitely tune in to the whole episode. Before I dive in, though, I want to make sure you know that the doors are open for a very special program, 4 weeks with me. It's called the Foundations of Emotional Wellbeing for HSPs. And it's a 4-week group course for deep feeling, sensitive people who are ready to break free of reactivity in life and love at the most foundational level, i.e. your nervous system level, so that you can settle into the kind of grounded safety and nourishing supportiveness that are at the very roots of a deeply loving marriage and a great life. Doors close November 30th, and until that day, this program is half off. It's only $199. Normally, it would be $400 or more, and you get a whole learning site. You get access to me in various ways throughout this month together, and it's starting at the beginning of December, kind of in the midst of the holiday season that can be so stressful and overwhelming for so many of us. So it's going to give you incredibly nourishing support and help you move through that time with so much more peace, and ultimately give you what you need to be able to go forward in your life from then on. I wanted to say henceforth, that's such a funny word, with the ability to be so much more grounded, so much more centered, and not get stuck in stress nearly as much or overwhelming emotions nearly as much. So you got to learn more about it. You can listen to last week's episode where I talked more in depth about it, or you can head over to the link that I've put in the show notes to describe it, or go directly to my website, www.hspmarriagecoaching.com, and you'll find under the courses tab this course, the Foundations of Emotional Wellbeing for HSPs. So absolutely check it out and join me. I would absolutely love to have you. All right, so let's talk about this thing I want to shout to the rooftops and help everybody in the world right now understand. Because this applies to more than just our intimate relationships. It applies to all relationships, and even relationships between groups of people who are different than each other. But of course, let's focus in on long-term relationships. So in our long-term relationships, there is this tendency to, over time, begin to see the person that we fell in love with as less and less someone so lovable and dear to us, and more a not so great person who's often doing things wrong or behaving in ways that feel almost against us. Have you felt that before? I know that I have, and certainly my clients have. And part of this is because the super love-boosting honeymoon phase biochemical cocktail of oxytocin and such wears off over time if you don't nurture it on purpose. This cocktail affects us as though we were almost wearing rosy glasses that see primarily all the wonderful things about our honey. But these glasses tend to get fuzzy and dark and scratchy after the first couple of years if we're not tending to them. So that's one metaphor, right? If we're not keeping them shiny and rosy on purpose. And physiologically, it truly is that our oxytocin dips significantly after those first several months or years with a new partner. And so the annoying things about them, the less than great things about them become more obvious. We see the things they're doing wrong more easily, and this sense of them being against us a little bit or being not so great tends to kind of sneak in. But we also start feeling like this person we once adored is becoming more like a bad guy because of, well, a sort of maladaptation of our human physiology. The unfortunate truth of the modern human condition, which affects our intimate relationships so deeply, is that we so easily and quickly regress into survival brain reactivity, both at the level of our thinking and physiologically in our nervous systems. So we will briefly get into the thinking piece of this in a few minutes, the mind part of this, but I, of course, have focused on that a lot already in the podcast. So if you're interested in that part, which is so important, go have a listen to almost any of the episodes on the podcast, but specifically there's one called The 2 Brain Biases That Work Against Love, which is episode 74. There is also episode 120, How to Work with Your 2 Brains for More Love, revisited, and Uncovering the Source of Relationship Pain, that's episode 16. But more and more over the years, I have found that although we cannot skip learning to work with our minds and our thinking if we want a great relationship, like that's imperative, we also cannot skip the work of understanding our nervous systems and learning how to caretake them and guide them into the states that are optimal for great relationships or even decent relationships. So I want to talk first about our nervous systems and how easily the fight, flight, or freeze branches of our nervous systems, our autonomic nervous systems, get activated. You've heard of the fight, flight, or freeze responses, I'm sure. But what's actually happening there is there a branch of our nervous system. They're literally giant nerves with lots of offshoots like tree branches. And they are the primal parts of our nervous system that were developed earlier in our human evolution, which were developed to keep us safe and alive, but not to keep us happy or to help us have good relationships. So I sometimes call the fight, flight, or freeze states that we fall into when our nervous system gets activated, when these branches of our nervous system gets activated, the SOS states, because they're meant for emergencies, right? They're like an urgent cry for help. SOS, SOS. So, of course, we all have these branches of our nervous systems, and we all fall into these SOS states. But for some of us, like highly sensitive people and deep feeling people, they can rear their metaphoric heads more often. In other words, we get, quote, dysregulated quicker because of how deeply we take in and process information. So when these more primal parts of our nervous systems get activated, when they go SOS, SOS, which so long as we have not developed nervous system resilience, they cannot help but do in our modern world, right? They go there fairly frequently. SOS, SOS. What happens is we lose connection to the part of our nervous system that is more evolved, that part of our system that allows us to feel and act the best towards others and ourselves and life. The part of our systems that allows us just to feel the best, right? When we're in the more activated parts of our nervous system, when those are taking over, we don't feel great. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But for a regular modern human, this activation of these SOS states are happening a lot of the time or chronically because of so many things in our modern lives, but also because we've lost touch with the things that we used to do as a species to metabolize the stress of life. So I'm not going to go into that in this episode, but it is true that in the past, humans had ways of metabolizing daily stress and bigger moments of stressors and trauma. And for various reasons, we have lost touch with those. We don't do those. And it's taking a major, major toll on the quality of our lives and relationships. On top of this, when our spouse stops acting quite as loving as they did in those early days, say they start paying more attention to their iPhone than you, or they act a bit irritable towards you, and also other little wrongdoings that go against what we expect should happen in our intimate relationship, when those start inevitably piling up, our primal brain and nervous system tends to react to that as if they were real threats, as if those little wrongdoings were tigers stalking our very lives. Now, if you haven't caught on, this part of your nervous system is highly intelligent in terms of keeping you surviving, but it is not highly intelligent in a more subtle, nuanced way. Like it can't tell the difference between a tiger stalking us in the bushes and our partner, say, making a cranky comment. And unfortunately, without the countering effects of that lovey-dovey hormonal cocktail of love's first blush, this survival reactivity that comes out of the fight, flight, or freeze states happens more and more. Not to mention when you have children together and have the responsibilities of running a household and having careers and juggling all of that. Not to mention the world outside of our personal lives gets really wonky and crazy and off the rails. You're going to find yourself in those SOS states more and more. So with all of this going on, not only will you possibly and likely feel more anxious or overwhelmed or down and depressed or burdened or resentful, burnt out, hurt, angry, lonely, unsupported, unfulfilled, distrustful, and disconnected, but also this reactivity of the nervous system will show up as anger, defensiveness, blame, closing down emotionally. A loss of touch with the intelligence in your brain, right? Your smarts, your wits, and a loss of connection to your heart, your intuition. Your communication will be more irritable, more reactive, more quote unquote immature. You're likely to snap more often. You're likely to lash out. You're likely to withdraw. You're likely to criticize and complain and argue. You're likely to feel more prickly and touchy, or what some people unkindly call sensitive, which they mean in the kind of worst sense of the word. And of course, when this is happening, this is when we cause harm to our loved ones and ourselves and do the things that really lead to discord, misunderstandings, disconnection, and over time, disintegration of our love and our relationship. I can talk about this so straightforwardly like this because in my first marriage, this was absolutely at the very heart of what went wrong. Looking back, I see I was very chronically dysregulated in my first marriage. I did not know how to work with my nervous system. I did not know how to guide myself out of the fight or flight SOS states. And so I interacted with my husband from this place very often, this reactive place very often. And our marriage just couldn't withstand that over time. And part of what happens is that when we are in this activated survival mode, these SOS states, or we can simply say dysregulated, when we're dysregulated, our focus becomes completely on ourself, not on the well-being of our relationship, not on the well-being of our loved one. It focuses on numero uno and making sure we are okay, right? Like we're protecting ourselves. And I should say, like, maybe this isn't fully the case when we're in kind of a low grade chronic SOS place, as much as when we're more actively triggered, like where we're not like a 2 on the activation scale, or maybe an 8 on the activation scale, or a 7 to a 10, like we're in the middle of an argument or something. That's when our focus becomes all about quote unquote protecting ourselves. And very interestingly, this is where a very big distortion comes in, a perspective, a reality distortion, which is that we start to other people. I just did air quotes around other. We start to see other people as threats, even when they are one of our most beloveds, like our spouse. Part of this is because higher stress levels, i.e. more dysregulation, causes us to see the bad in other people. Research shows that dysregulation makes us actually misinterpret a neutral comment from another person as a criticism, or to see their behaviors in a more threatening, more negative light, or to read their words and behaviors way more negatively than reality warrants. In other words, when we're in an SOS state, we do not see them or their actions accurately. We see them as much more threatening. So in that sort of narrowed, limited perception that happens in these reactive emotional states, we can start seeing our loved one in a way that's like, oh, this person's bad. This person's against us. This person isn't on my side. Right? And you might literally start having those types of thoughts. We really start to see them as the baddie, or what I call the bad other. So you may have had this experience when you were really triggered or activated, that your honey suddenly became not them, no longer that real, living, breathing, feeling, tender being who you love, but rather that bad guy who's against you, who's a threat to your, well, when you think about it, you're not actually that sure what they're a threat to, but just a threat. Right? So in other words, our nervous system states set the stage for our thoughts to go in a more fear-based, judgmental, negative, even diluted direction. And not only does this happen in the heat of the moment, like when you're obviously triggered or just generally stressed out and your spouse says something a little off or whatever, but it also happens in a more subtle way over years and years of these things happening again and again. So your unconscious perception of your spouse may eventually harden into a sense of he's the bad guy, especially when you pair this nervous system activation stuff with the primal brain's tendency, right? The lizard brain's tendency of focusing on what is bad and wrong that I talk about all the time. Now, this tendency to focus on what's bad and wrong, this happens because our brains are wired that way. Again, they are 2/3 more likely to see what's bad than what is good, just by default. That's just kind of how our human brains are set up. But then you go ahead and you add dysregulation into the mix, and you don't stand a chance at feeling loving and admiring of your spouse very often, because your whole primal nervous system and brain's perception have narrowed. So you lose touch with the ability to feel your partner as a real human, the dear human that he really is. Because during these SOS, fight or flight freeze states, empathy, right, the brain's empathy centers and compassion centers becomes deactivated. So you can't feel connection. You can't feel closeness. You can't feel belonging. You can't feel togetherness. You're way more likely to feel like he's falling short, he's against you, he's a threat to you, it's you versus him, he's bad, almost like he's an enemy in a sense, even if just a bit. Now, you can see this playing out in politics right now and in the world in all sorts of ways. As our maladapted human mind, body, heart systems do their reactive thing, yeah? because so few of us have learned how to work with our nervous systems, our mind, body, heart systems in a healthy way. Because so few of us have learned what's really happening in our nervous systems and how to kind of guide them. Of course, we fall into this like delusion that groups that are not us, like people with different views or skin color or nationalities or genders, become in our narrow division less than human. And from there, it's so easy to violate them, act against them, hurt them. This is at the very source of all the crazy division, destruction, war in our world. This is tearing apart our world, and it is literally killing people and our planet. But it also kills marriages. And just to be clear, when I say this, I mean this tendency to fall into these SOS states and therefore get trapped in this delusion that other people, even our most loved ones, are bad somehow, are a threat. All right, so maybe you too can sense a bit of bad othering towards your significant other. And it's going to feel, just so you can know what to look for, a little bit like a hardening, like a constriction, like way less of the loving feelings than you used to have. It will feel like there's more distance and disconnection. There will be more arguments. There will be less fun together. There might even be more numbness. There will be kind of a hardened experience between you. There will be more tension, because you're seeing this being, this man, this partner as bad in some way, right? You're seeing him as against you and not as the tender being he actually is. Now, obviously, if this is happening, this isn't likely to be the whole entire experience that you have of your partner, but maybe just in moments or maybe just a low level kind of chronic experience that you have of this. Like I said before, subtly, this might be happening subtly for you. Either way, it always ends up creating painful divides, whether now or later. But I really want you to understand this. This is maybe the most important part of this episode. The real divide is actually an inner divide in ourselves in the moment. It is a disconnection with the part of us that can connect. And if we have any hope of feeling the kind of intimacy and connection and love and joy in our relationship that we want, or in our wider world that we want, we have to learn how to connect back to the part of us that can connect. That is the real solution to stop the division, to stop the disconnection, and to feel the belonging and the connection that is available in your relationship. And of course, we can extend that to the wider world. Now, we have to understand what happens when we get disconnected. We have to understand the physiology of what is actually happening in our nervous system and brain. And we have to recognize when it's actually happening and then learn skills to bring ourselves back to the place inside of ourselves from which we can connect. And that is the calm and connect part of your nervous system. And I'm going to tell you more about that in a second. But first, understand that it's like this. When I'm reacting to him, to my husband, it's actually something in me that needs tending. In other words, this primal, protective, maladapted to the modern world part of me, my nervous system and primal brain, needs to be caretaken. When I'm seeing him as bad, feeling like he's against me, it's like a plea from this divided, disconnected part of myself that is asking me to tend to it. It's asking me to tend to it, not my husband, not anyone else. I mean, absolutely, we can co-regulate with other people and animals and plants. But first, we need to know that something in us is asking for that. And then we can answer the call. Then we can tend to it in whichever way. So unless I tend to, or I caretake and guide these primal parts of my nervous system, my flight, fight, freeze responses will keep taking over. They will keep hijacking me and keep me looping in reactivity, defensiveness, and severed connection. And the same goes for you. But luckily, I can guide myself back into the part of me that can connect, that can restore our sense of togetherness, my sense of belonging with my husband, that can no longer see him as the enemy, but as a partner, as a lover, as someone who is on my team in life. And you can too. You can learn to do that too. So you don't have to just stand back and allow this maladaptation to shape your relationship for the worse. You have the solution, the remedy right here inside you, in your mind, in your body, in your nervous system. We all do. So I'm going to tell you about that in just a second. But I do want to make a side note here that when I keep saying this word maladaptation of our systems, it's not that we evolved improperly. It's that our nervous systems haven't fully caught up to the chronic, overwhelming stressors of modern life, right? Human evolution, changes in our physiology happens very slowly. And change in our society has happened very, very fast over the past several hundred years. And our nervous system is adapted well, right? These more primal parts of our nervous system are adapted very brilliantly to keeping us surviving, right? And that is their primary job. And they are wise, they are intelligent in that way. Like I said before, they aren't very wise when it comes to having good relationships. But we do have another part of our nervous system, a more evolved part, that is very adapted to connection, harmony, collaboration, and love. Again, that is the calm and connect nervous system, which I'm going to get back to in a second. What I want you to know now is that we can use our minds to guide our nervous system and work directly with the nervous system with a language it speaks, which isn't only words. It's oftentimes body-based. We can do that in order to guide our nervous system. We want to have the skills to guide ourselves out of the SOS states, out of dysregulation, when we don't need to be in those SOS states. And we want to have the skills to guide ourselves into this more recently developed, in terms of human evolution, that more evolved part of our nervous system, the calm and connect system, right? This is the part of us that can connect, the part we so easily fall out of in our modern lives. So to connect to our calm and connect system, which is also sometimes referred to as the tend and befriend system, so you can get a great sense from those names, those titles, what it actually helps you feel and do. But to connect to that more recently evolved part of our nervous system, we do need to understand our nervous system in general to some degree and be self-aware enough to know when and how to guide ourselves there. And it's not as straightforward as some of the ways people break down this nervous system stuff. I do want to offer that there is also something called the rest and digest part of your nervous system. You may have heard about that more than the calm and connect, but that is in fact not the same as the calm and connect system. It's a not so known fact with the oversimplification that many may take when trying to educate people about their nervous system. And I don't think it's enough. I think learning in a little bit more depth, but also in a somewhat simple way so you can actually grasp it, is very important, is in fact essential to be able to truly and regularly and consistently guide yourself into this calm and connect part of your nervous system and not stay stuck in this SOS states, but allow them when important and necessary. So I really believe that to have a relationship we cherish or even just feel pretty good in, we need to be educated about how to work with our nervous system. We need to have sort of the owner's manual and to be able to use it. We need to understand its workings and how to guide it, or it will take us on a very wild and painful ride through life and love, which many of you may have been experiencing. Whereas when you learn to tend to your nervous system, caretake it, and move into the calm and connect nervous system state on purpose, you're going to be able to access the kind of love and connection that you want. You'll have the ability to see your honey as a honey, as the sweet, lovable being they really are, and not as the bad guy anymore. You'll be able to access your own heart and your wisest, highest intelligence. So you'll be able to solve any problems that arise between you with much more ease, creativity, and grace. And you'll be able to communicate with patience and effectiveness and in the ways that really get through to your partner best. I truly believe it is not optional at this time in history to learn how to regulate and caretake our nervous systems, to learn to connect to that part of us that can actually genuinely connect if we want a healthy, loving marriage and also a healthy world one day. It all starts here. This is the foundation of not just emotional wellness, but overall wellness. Nervous system dysregulation isn't just the biggest problem in our relationships, but also in our overall health, physical and mental too. This is why I'm so thrilled to be teaching this 4-week program on how to regulate your nervous system, because it is the foundation of your emotional well-being, as the course is called, and it is the root of a loving relationship. So I'm about to give you some concrete help to shift out of this bad other space you likely fall into sometimes, so hold tight. But before I do want to reiterate that you are invited to join me in this upcoming program. And again, the price is currently half off. And of course, you're going to get direct access to me. You're going to be able to work closely with me during these 4 weeks together to be able to move into this common connect nervous system, to be able to caretake your nervous system and really develop a strong foundation of emotional well-being and ultimately foundation of relationship well-being. So again, the description and the place to sign up is in the show notes or over at my website, hspmarriagecoaching.com, under the courses tab. Make sure you sign up by November 30th, and we get started just a few days after that. All right, so here are 3 concrete steps to shift out of this bad other place you might go sometimes. First, you're going to recognize how you are seeing your partner as the bad other. Sort of a preliminary step. Second, you're going to start to see him as a human other again. And third, I'm going to tell you when we get there. So that's just sort of an overview of what we're about to dive into. Let's dive into number 1, the first step. Recognize how you are seeing your partner as the bad other. So I invite you to get out a pen and paper and write these questions down and then answer them. You can either pause as I go through each question and answer them. That's probably the best way to do it. If not, just come back and answer them when you have time. But do answer these questions. That's how you're going to affect real change. So here's my question. In what ways are you currently kind of seeing your partner as the bad other? And what does that feel like to do that? Just explore that. And there's not really a right or wrong here. Just notice what comes up for you as you answer these questions. Please don't focus so much on all the bad things your partner does as you're answering this. Focus more on that your primal biology, that your primal brain and nervous system is turning him into the bad other, and how that's happening and what it feels like when you do that. How do you feel when you do that? Right? So you're just developing awareness of how this affects you and how your brain does this. Feel free to pause to really do that work. Moving on to step 2, turn your vision now on purpose to start seeing your partner as the human other again. So this is actually a gift to yourself to start seeing your partner as the human other that he really is, because you used to and it felt good. Yeah. If you recall back to the early days when things were good between you, your partner used to not just be a real human other, but the good other, right? Maybe even not so other at all. Maybe he almost felt like part of you. I'm sure that back in the day, there were so many endearing things about your partner. Even if you saw some of his inadequacies, you didn't hold those against him because you were connected to his humanness and the goodness innate in it. And the reality is that he hasn't become less lovable, less human, less endearing, or less of a good person. It's just that your perception over time of him has changed in this wild ride of life. So we want to start to change it back to, oh, he's this human. He's this human with funny quirks and all these funny ways who's feeling and struggling in this wild ride too. So, in order to do that, here are a few sets of questions to help you take down the veil of the bad other and to start to re-see your partner again as the human other. And when you're able to do that, you'll start to feel more warmth of heart, more connection, and even like he is in fact a lovable teammate in life with you. All right? So play with these 3 sets of questions. Again, I suggest writing them down and answering them. Here is set A. How might this partner of yours be struggling? What might he be grappling with? What's going on for them that might have them not feeling so great and not showing up in all the ways that you love them to? So really get curious and answer those questions. Take your time with it. Here is the next set of questions. What deep down really matters to him? What do you think he really wants? What do you think he really wants to experience in this relationship with you? What do you think your partner most cares about? Like really cares about deep down. And I want you to be careful about going like, oh, well, he only cares about his iPhone. Like, no, really. What deep down does he really care about? What really matters to him underneath some of his maybe less than, in your eyes, ideal behaviors? All right, take your time answering those. And the third set, the last set of questions is, what do you know to be true about who your partner really is? Open your mind, open your heart to that. What do you know to be true about who he really is? And just answer that question and just see what comes out as you write about this. Again, take your time, pause if you need to. And once you've answered those questions, notice what that feels like inside of you as you start to see these things about this honey of yours, this partner of yours. What's it like for you? Does that shift a little of the hardening? Does that open your heart a little bit more? Oftentimes seeing what might be real, more true, seeing how our partner might be hurting, seeing what they most care about can not only free us from our hurt and our hardening, but allow us to feel compassion and love. It can literally get us into our empathy centers in our brain and our compassion centers, which compassion actually feels good, whereas empathy can feel not so great, but better than resentment and hardening. So this will really feel so much better to us and get us really so much further in our relationship. It'll make our relationship and the way we relate to our partner so much better when we're in this space of compassion and love versus that threatened, he's the threat state that we fall into so easily as human beings and HSPs. Now, I do want to say this may or may not really shift things for you, these sets of questions and sitting down to answer them. If it did, wonderful. It actually helped you move into your calm and connect nervous system, your tend and befriend nervous system, the only place from which we can truly see the other person as real and lovable and feel our hearts loving them. This is a testament to the power of guiding yourself into the calm and connect and how important it is. You will want to build your capacity to stay there and return quickly when you fall out of it. And if this exercise didn't shift things so much for you, it likely means that working with your nervous system directly instead of working with your thoughts to affect your nervous system. That's what we just did. We thought about things. We thought about our partner in a different way, and that shifted you more into your calm and connect nervous system, some of you. If it didn't work so well, it may mean that you need to work more directly with your nervous system. Again, the nervous system can kind of speak English, but it speaks more fluently a different language. And that is more the language of the body, the language of awareness. I'm not going to tell you exactly what that looks like today. But the point here is that working directly with your nervous system will be the most important thing for you to do. Our thought work, which is so powerful, and I teach and believe in deeply, it won't work nearly so well if nervous system dysregulation is strong or super chronic. And this is why this nervous system work is usually the first thing I teach my clients, and why I'm now offering this course, Foundations of Emotional Well-Being, because things will not change for the better unless your nervous system has a capacity to flexibly move out of fight, flight, or freeze when it goes there and into the calm and connect, and also the rest digest. So for everybody, come join me in Foundations of Emotional Well-Being. You're going to learn so much in this time together, and you're also going to get to keep access to the course for as long as it shall live, so you can continue to build deeper and deeper nervous system resilience and stay more and more often and come back more and more easily to this calm and connect place from which everything in your life feels easier, feels lighter, feels more joyful, feels safer, and from which your relationship has the absolute best chance of becoming the most amazing one it can be. So head to the show notes, check out this course, sign up, and be ready to start feeling better than ever in your own mind, body, heart system, and your relationship. Again, you can go directly to my website, hspmarriagecoaching.com, and go to the courses and events tab. And right there, underneath it, you'll find Foundations of Emotional Well-Being. You can learn all about it and join right from there. All right, my dear ones, may you feel connected to and on the same loving team with your spouse and be oh so well.